guys, Miss Moore here. Alright, so last week we read the beginning of I Survived, the Shark Attacks of 1916, and the last we left off was the Captain Wilson was about to tell them a story about a shark that he saw when he was out on a ship one day. So we're going to read chapter 3 and then talk about some things, okay? And if you are behind, if you did not listen to chapter 1 or 2, make sure you go back and find the video on Google Classroom or YouTube of what you missed. So that way you're not behind, okay? Okay, chapter 3. The year was 1852, the captain began. I wasn't much older than you lads. It was one of my first whaling voyages. 2 years at sea, and finally I was heading home across the Pacific. His voice was low and whispery, like it was coming from someplace very far away. Suddenly the sky turned black. The wind started to howl and rain poured down. I'll never forget those waves. I thought our ship was going to be tossed to the moon. And the wind, it ripped our ship apart like it was made of paper. We all went into the water. I grabbed a barrel and somehow I made it through the night. By the time the sun came up, the storm had passed. I was all alone, just a tiny speck in the middle of the ocean. Are you picturing right now in your mind, are you thinking about Captain Wilson being just a tiny speck in the middle of the ocean and the storm ripping apart their ship? The other men died? Dewey asked, but the captain didn't seem to hear. And then I saw the fin. The shark? Whispered Monty, edging a little closer to Sid. Shh, Sid said. It circled me for a long while, the captain said. Around and around, real slow, like he was toying with me. Little by little, it came closer and closer, until I could see its eyes. Black as coal, he whispered. Killer eyes. The captain was looking out the window now, like he expected to see that shark with its open jaws pressed against the glass. Killer eyes, he repeated quietly. It was a minute before he started talking again. The guys waited with their tongues practically hanging out. The beast went underwater, and for a second I thought maybe it decided I wasn't worth the trouble. But then something bumped me in the leg, scraped me bloody. The skin of a shark is rough. You can use it as sandpaper. The captain rubbed his leg like it still hurt. It came in for the kill with its jaws wide open, the captain said. Big enough to swallow me whole, and the teeth, like daggers, 1,000 daggers, all lined up in rows. The captain's hands were shaking now. I had an old harpoon tip in my pocket. I grabbed it and I stabbed the shark. He pounded the counter so hard that his office mug crashed to the floor. Coffee mug crashed to the floor. The captain didn't notice. Right in its killer eye, he said. You killed it? Dewey said. The captain shook his head. Oh no, he said, but it swam off. Disappeared. It wasn't my time. Then he stood up and put on his tattered captain's hat. I must get home now, he said. My sweet Deborah will be waiting for me. Deborah was his wife. She'd been dead for at least 20 years. Uh-oh, his brain must not be working too well. Chet and the guys watched him leave. Uncle Jerry had come out of the kitchen when he heard the crash of the captain's cup. Poor old guy, he said as he swept up the mess. His mind is like Swiss cheese. Swiss cheese is the cheese with all the holes in it, so he's saying that his mind has got lots of holes in it. He's getting old. You mean that story isn't true? Monty asked. Uncle Jerry shrugged. I think the captain spins a mighty fine tale. Stabbed it with a harpoon tip, Dewey laughed. Killer eyes, Monty barked. Next the captain will be telling us he got gobbled up by a whale, Sid said. Still, Chet thought about the captain all day. He didn't really believe the story either. Uncle Jerry was right. Who ever heard of a shark attacking a person? No, it wasn't the shark that scared him. It was the idea of being alone in the middle of the ocean. Strange, but Chet could imagine that feeling. He'd been traveling around the country with Mama and Papa most of his life. Papa was always chasing some new business idea, selling motor cars in Oregon, building bicycles in St. Louis, taking family portraits in Philadelphia. Mama would get them settled into an apartment or a run-down little house. Chet would try to make friends, And just when they were starting to get comfortable, the business would go bad or Papa would get some other idea. "We're hitting the road," Papa would announce, and Mama would have to start packing again. Chet was supposed to go along to California, where Papa was sure he'd finally strike it rich. But then Mama decided that Chet would stay with Uncle Jerry instead. "It's a nice town," Mama had said, "and Uncle Jerry will take good care of you." Chet remembered all the fun he used to have with Uncle Jerry when he was little, how Uncle Jerry had taught him how to throw a baseball. But they hadn't seen each other in years. Would his uncle even recognize him after all this time? He shouldn't have worried. Uncle Jerry was standing on the train platform when Chet got off, a huge grin on his face. "It's about time," he said to Chet, wrapping him up in a hug that went on until the train pulled out of the station. From that first day, Uncle Jerry made him feel right at home. But Chet missed Mama and Papa, and it didn't matter how much he loved being with Uncle Jerry or how many people shouted, "Hi, Chet," when they came into the diner. Soon enough, he'd have to join Mama and Papa in California. Would he ever really belong anywhere? Or would he always be on his own, a tiny speck in the middle of the ocean? That's the end of chapter 3. Okay, so we're learning some more about Chet. We're learning about why he's with Uncle Jerry, what his mama and dad are doing. And he's with Uncle Jerry while his parents are in California trying to get their business going. And he has had to move around a lot in his life. So we've learned that about him. And we've learned that he doesn't really feel like he belongs. So he's probably a little lonely. And he's probably wanting to fit in more, which is why Friday when we read about his friends, that was so important. Because we're learning how important his friendships are to him. Okay, so we are going to talk about imagery today. So, at the beginning of the chapter, when Captain Wilson was telling his story, he used a lot of imagery. Did you have a picture in your head when you were listening to that part of the story? Let's listen again. Well, actually, let me go back and let's just go over this part first. Imagery is descriptive language. It helps the reader see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and feel the text, okay? So, when I read it again, I want you to listen and see what words you can pick out that help you see the text, hear what's going on, maybe taste, maybe not in this section, touch, smell, feel, think about those types of things. Suddenly, the sky turned black. The wind started to howl and rain poured down. I'll never forget those waves. I thought our ship was going to be tossed to the moon. And the wind, it ripped our ship apart like it was made of paper. We all went into the water. I grabbed a barrel and somehow I made it through the night. By the time the sun came up, the storm had passed. I was all alone, just a tiny speck in the middle of the ocean. And I'm going to skip down here. It says he saw the shark. It circled me for a long while, the captain said, around and around, real slow, like he was toying with me. Little by little, it came closer and closer until I could see its eyes. Black as coal, he whispered. Killer eyes. So, we had lots of imagery in that section. I see the sky turned black. That helps you see. If you're thinking about the boat being in the middle of the ocean and then the sky turns black. The wind starts to howl. You can hear, we've had some really windy days here in the mountains lately, so you can hear that wind blowing. The rain poured down. You've been in the rain before. Maybe you can feel what it feels like for that rain to come down on you. He thought our ship was going to be tossed to the moon. That's figurative language. So that tells you how rough that wind and those waves are. Because obviously, it's not actually going to go to the moon. We know that's impossible, so that's hyperbole. It ripped our ship apart like it was made of paper. That's another example of figurative language, and that also helps tell you just how rough that storm was. Just a tiny speck in the middle of the ocean. That helps you see. Also, he could have added some things in about maybe the smells, because we know the ocean smells like salty water, maybe a little fishy. So that could have always been in there. I remember reading about, I don't think that's come up yet. Nope, that's next. He says black as coal when he's talking about the shark's eyes, so that helps you see they're very dark. And that is a, what type of figurative language? As coal. That's a simile. It compares his eyes with coal. And then we had an example of how you can feel. Do you remember it? On the next page it says, something bumped me in the leg, scraped me bloody. The skin of a shark is rough. You can use it as sandpaper. So, you can feel what that skin might feel like if you know what sandpaper feels like. So all of that is the captain giving you descriptive language that helps you see, hear, feel, touch. We didn't really have any taste in this one, but authors can use words like texture-y words, like if something was creamy, like ice cream, that'll help the reader feel that. Or maybe more smells if that could go with food too. Like the smell of popcorn. Alright, so what I want you to do is I'm going to put a assignment on Seesaw for you, and I want you to write a story, and I want you to try to use some imagery in there. Use descriptive language. Try to help me see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and feel what you're describing to me. It can be any story. Just make up a story. It could be something that's happened in real life. It could be something made up. Whatever you want to do. So just write a story. It could be however long you want. I want you to be creative. And try to use some figurative language in there. We learned figurative language before school got out, so try to use some similes, some metaphors, alliteration, hyperbole. Try to use whatever you can and be descriptive, okay? And you can turn that in for your assignment this week if you want to. And like I said, just be creative with it and have fun, okay? And tomorrow we will read chapter 4. See you then.